Namaskar, a very warm welcome to Sansad TV. I'm Deepika Dhanda Singh. India is currently holding the G20 presidency and the Leaders Summit is being held in New Delhi. Brazil is the next chair of the grouping and will be hosting the G20 summit in 2024. India and Brazil are two prominent members of the G20. Both the nations celebrated 74 years of diplomatic relations in 2022. In more recent years, both the nations have elevated their relationship based on a common global vision, shared democratic values, and a commitment to foster economic growth with social inclusion for the welfare of the people of both countries. India and Brazil share a very close and multifaceted relationship both at bilateral level as well as in plurilateral forums such as BRICS, G20, G4, IPSA, International Solar Alliance, as well as in the larger multilateral bodies such as the UN, WTO, UNESCO, etc. Diplomatic relations were established in 1948 with both countries opening the embassies in the same year. The two countries have been strategic partners for more than a decade. India's relationship with Brazil continued to grow over the past decades with various high-level exchanges and got further intensified in 2019 and early 2020 with the back-to-back VVIP visits. As part of celebration of 75 years of diplomatic relations between India and Brazil, and as a follow-up to the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Hiroshima, the Union Prime Minister of Parliamentary Affairs, Felix Joshi, led a 10-member Parliament goodwill delegation to Brazil from June 11 to 13, 2023. Trade and investment between them have grown over the years, as has cooperation in important areas such as bioenergy. In 2019 to 2020, the bilateral trade was valued at $7.04 billion, with exports worth $3.97 billion and imports worth $3.07 billion. As two of the world's largest democracies, their collaboration not only strengthens the Global South's voice on the international stage, but also paves the way for a more inclusive and equitable world order. In today's G20 show, we'll be talking about India and Brazil's relationship with the context of G20. And to talk about it all with us, we have a very distinguished guest, His Excellency Kenneth Haczynski, the Nobrega, the Brazilian ambassador to India. Welcome to the show, Ambassador.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for being a part of the show. To begin with, I'd want to ask you, what is your experience of India's G20 presidency in comparison to the previous presidencies?
So I'm not so aware of how the previous G20 presidencies unfolded. But what I can say about the Indian presidency, that India has shown leadership and really a tireless disposition to build consensus in challenging times. We all know that we are living in challenging times. And reaped results in the sense that India managed to bring to center stage of the G20 discussions the interests and needs of developing countries, of the Global South.
All right, thanks so much for your insight on that. I would want to now talk about global economy. I'd want to ask you, what steps can G20 countries take to ensure inclusive economic growth, where we not only talk about the GDP, but also other aspects of the economy? What are your views on it?
Yes, I think that the starting point is that under Brazilian presidency, the G20 will work under an overarching concept of sustainable development. The idea is to bring back to the center stage of the discussions of the G20 the concept of sustainable development in its three full components: environmental, economic, and social. We feel that the two components, the economic and the social components of the concept, have been kind of neglected, and it puts an unreasonable burden on developing countries when it comes to climate mitigation and climate adaptation. The pressure for developing countries to devote resources only to mitigation, when they also have more urgent priorities of tackling health challenges, hunger, fighting hunger, and eradicating poverty.
Ambassador, how can Brazil, as a member of G20, help in addressing the challenges posed by economic inequality among nations?
Yes, I think that the idea would, under the aegis of this concept, work on the realities of this, on the hard realities on the ground, by promoting a more development financing more attuned to the needs and to the realities of the developing countries. This is why in our presidency the idea would be to try to make the Sherpa track and the financial track more coordinated in order to find new financial products that could tackle the challenge of offering to developing countries financial products that can really help boost their economies and their social policies. For example, we need to discuss alleviation of indebtedness. We have to discuss on ODA, meaning developed countries have to live up to their pledges to keep ODA, and also financial products which would elaborated with responsibility in the sense that they can be conceded to developing countries, and developing countries will be able to repay also these new rescheduled debts. So this is one pillar, but another important pillar is the trade pillar, and then here we have the challenge of refraining from introducing new trade barriers based on environmental concerns. The point is that environmental concerns, of course, are legitimate, but when you bring environmental concerns to the realm of trade policy, you have to be very careful, because then you can really erect barriers to developing countries. For example, if you impose a tax on a bar based on carbon footprint, what you have is you could have the following scenario: a developing country who has historically given little contribution to emissions, who has already fulfilled its obligation of proposing a domestic NDC, then but wants to export a product which has a heavier carbon footprint. So a country who emits little, has already emitted little, now when exporting a single product, maybe a very important single product for this country, to a developed country, and has to and finds a barrier in the form of a carbon tax, will not be able to develop its industry because of an imposition of a carbon barrier on a country that never really has contributed to world emissions.
Brazil being the strongest economy of South America, India being the strongest economy of Southeast Asia, do you see both the countries? Do you think both the countries can set the agenda for the new world order through the G20 summit?
I think that Brazil and India together, they are, because of the sheer size of their territories, their economies, their population, in this case more India than Brazil, but also of their biodiversity. I think that they have together the clout to be mainstays of the world discussion when it comes to tackle the big global challenges. I think we have the legitimacy also because we are the big democracies and we have a tradition of putting on the table in international negotiations the needs and plights of the developing countries. So I think here we have a key word is legitimacy and experience in international discussions.
All right, now shifting focus to trade. In this ever-changing geopolitical challenges, the need of formalization of FTAs cannot be ignored. Both India and Brazil are wanting to increase their shares in global exports. So what challenges can both the countries face with regards to FTAs, and how can they be addressed within the G20 framework?
Well, if we are talking about FTAs, we are talking about the aspect of the bilateral trade and economic relations. Well, we have a fixed preference agreement, which is not a free trade agreement, which I think encompasses 450 products. This is too little. I think both sides, India and Brazil, they are aware that they need to expand their treaty. The treaty they have concluded, I think, perhaps 15 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, to evolve into a free trade agreement. But having said that, you know that in last years, bilateral trade has increased significantly. India is now the 5th largest trade partner of Brazil. So you imagine if you can expand our trade agreements, what potential would we have to expand in them even more our trade?
India and Brazil have signed a very important social security agreement. So what is social security agreement and how can it make India and Brazil's trade relationship more efficient?
Well, I think that social security is part of being a democratic country in the sense that it's part. I'm not saying that countries which are not democracies do not have social security, but social security as conceived in democracies is a bit different. I think that it will facilitate trade and I think the movement of people to Brazilians going to work in India, Indians going to work in Brazil. I think it's an important agreement which have concluded.
Now, talking about energy, in what ways can Brazil, with its expertise of ethanol industry, help India reduce its dependence on fossil fuels and consequently reduce cash outflows?
Yes, I think this energy cooperation may become one of the pillars of our bilateral relations because it has as you have mentioned, a strategic dimension in the sense that it's about energy security, it's about fighting climate change, very structural challenges, but and also it has to do with making money in the sense that we have the opportunity of connecting our production and supply chains of ethanol, and also our production and supply chains in the car industry. And Brazil, of course, has introduced in 1975 its first ethanol car. So we have developed now we have a mature industry of the so-called flex fuel motors. So we can, of course, offer India our experience, and India will, with its technological potential, of course, will build on this, on the results we have reaped, and of course developed solutions attuned to your realities.
Does this open new trade routes between both the countries?
Yes, definitely.
Taking up global health now, in the recent times we witnessed world health crisis. So how can G20 work better to face situations like pandemics and to ensure that every citizen gets has a fair chance to get vaccines and medical supplies?
Well, the Minister of Health of Brazil, when she came to the meeting of Ministers of Health here in India, she put forward 4 priorities for Brazil in terms of tackling public health challenges within the G20. These are the 4 ones are the following. The first is promoting the local and regional production of medicines and vaccines, and also of active pharmaceutical ingredients. The second one is the promotion of digital health in terms of telemedicine, and also production of data based on the data gathered by countries which have universal health coverage. This is a second priority. The third priority, also connected with universal health coverage, has to do with focusing more on neglected diseases that affect disproportionately developing more vulnerable populations. And the fourth one has to do with tackling the new public health challenges brought about by climate change. Now, it has to do with adaptation to climate change from a health point of view. And of course, here there is a need, we see the need of technology transfer also to developing countries so that they can cope more with those new challenges. And all these 4 components, they are part of the social inclusion pillar of the concept I mentioned at the outset of sustainable development. This would be the overarching concept of Brazilian presidency. And of course, with a focus again on poverty eradication and hunger eradication.
All right, now moving on to food security. India and Brazil are major agriculture industries. They're both major food producers for the world, right? And Indian cattle makes up the majority of livestock in Brazil. So what are the key learnings that both the countries can present in front of the forum, G20 forum?
I think both countries can be proud of having attained self-sufficiency, or almost 100% self-sufficiency in terms of feeding its population. I think it's a very important achievement. Every country can be proud of that. I think another point is that the countries can show that they can cooperate in order to exchange experience to improve the sustainability and the productivity of their respective agricultural sectors. I think we already have a good cooperation, bilateral cooperation in terms, for example, of improving productivity of milk. This is one example. And we can, of course, we also are trying to develop in Brazil more production of pulses, which are one of the food staples of India, right? Brazil, in this case, has to learn with India the benefits of pulses consumption. These are but 2 examples.
All right, now, Ambassador, India is at a very important stage. And we're also hosting the G20 summit. The next presidency is with Brazil. So what are the key expectations from Brazil, and what can be the key learnings from this summit as we pass on the presidency to Brazil?
Well, I think that India has proposed a quite ambitious agenda. India has set the bar quite high for the next developing country to take over. But I think to be ambitious is one takeaway. I think the second is this tireless disposition of finding consensus. We know that this is no little achievement in these days. I think these are 2 important takeaways. The third one, that India could include the whole country in this kind of celebration of its G20 presidency. We had India offered meetings throughout the whole country, and this was an interesting trait of of this presidency. I think that Brazil can learn from this experience. I think consensus building, the idea of presenting the country to the world, and also, of course, keeping on living up to the expectation of maintaining the interests and plights of the developing world, of the global South, on the agenda of the G20, as you have so well managed to do.
All right, Ambassador. Now, something about your forte. You have decades of experience on subjects like infrastructure, climate change, sustainable development, trade promotions. What are the challenges that we face with regards to this?
Well, I think that when it comes to infrastructure, we see in Brazil, for example, one of the challenges of building infrastructure is to build infrastructure which is sustainable, in the sense that when it does not interfere with the environment in such a way that it can disrupt in a very serious manner. So environmental impact, analysis of environmental impact when it comes to building infrastructure is a very important concern in Brazil. And sustainable development, I have mentioned so many times this concept, this is very key to us, not only when it comes to international negotiations, but also when we apply internally. Recently, we had this Amazon summit in the city of Belém, in the state of Pará. And there if you see the declaration which was issued by the participants, Brazil, all the South American countries which also are in the Amazon region, and also two countries from other regions, basically Congo and Indonesia, because they have after Brazil, after the Amazon, they have the largest tropical forests in the world. This meeting issued a declaration setting up principles of sustainable development in a very concrete way.
Ambassador, how can we achieve sustainable development while promoting trade and building infrastructure?
Yes. Well, the point is that Brazil, of course, in its G20 presidency, will work under the overarching concept of sustainable development. And how do you put this in practice? What we are trying to do is to focus on two main pillars: development financing and trade. Developing financing meaning finding new financial products that would be more attuned to developing country needs. As we know, after the pandemic, economic recovery in many developing countries have been quite uneven. And so I think that here we need to combine relief of indebtedness. I think we have also to tell developed countries they have to live up to their commitments of ODA, and you have also to find some creative financial products that would be more attuned to the needs of developing countries, which also need not only servicing debt, but also they need to conduct their social policies and fighting and policies that fight poverty.
All right. On that note, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for the valuable insights. It was indeed great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, that was all about the diverse topics with regards to G20. That's all for now. Do stay tuned to Sansad TV. This is Deepika Dhanda Singh signing off. Namaskar.